Hello. Hello. My name is Brandon Neal. I'm a producer in the President's Office at the Juilliard School, and I'm welcoming you here to our talk, Where Do We Go From Here? An exploration of opera's role in 21st century art making and leadership's charge to move it forward. With us is this beautiful, incredible, amazing panel. To my left, Melanie Bacaling, opera director, Jennifer Bowman, director of community and learning at Houston Grand Opera, and Dr. Lori Hicks, director of opera at UNC Chapel Hill. We'd like to welcome everyone who's in attendance and also our virtual audience as well. There will be a Q&A session portion of this conversation. You can ask questions at either the mic on either side of the hall or via the Sphinx app in the Q&A section of the REN Live tab with access code REN. Great. So, my friends, my sisters, when we first started talking about this conversation, I was thinking about my time in opera. I was at the Santa Fe Opera for 6 seasons, and I left there not in a good place and really detached from opera. And it wasn't until the pandemic that I really got invigorated back into the space of the injustices of the opera space and the white supremacist culture that inhabits it, which is long-standing and powerful at this point. But at that moment, they were forced to reckon with a lot of things, ask a lot of questions. They couldn't just get by with posting Black Lives Matter on their Instagram pages. They had to account for and address the systemic harm that they've done to Black and brown bodies in those opera houses. And it wasn't until, And it wasn't until fire shut up in my bones at the Met that I realized how much I loved this art form. And it was seeing myself on stage that really reinvigorated that. So I have this question for you because time has gone by, 2020 has happened, a lot of changes have happened, a lot of works have been made, a lot of Black and brown people have been put on stage. Have we solved the racial divide in opera?
No.
Next question.
I'll follow up to that to start us off. I say no so readily because though we have had more stories on our stage, it has come at the cost of siloing our Black and brown artists, our Black and brown stories in a way that feels still very much like we're ticking off boxes instead of actually engaging in the humanity of our artists. And to me, there's still so much work to be done to actually integrate that into a full season and into the actual repertoire of our beloved opera canon and bringing in new works to the canon. It still feels very separated, and that needs a lot of work.
Jen, Dr. Hicks?
Yeah, I will piggyback off that and say, coming from the administration part of it, I see the leadership at organizations, so I know that we have not closed the racial divide, and until we can figure out how the leadership can match the Black American, Latino American, Anglo-American population of our nation and, all other cultures, I don't think we will be there, and we need that diversity of ideas. Like corporations will tell you all the time that they really get into DEI efforts because they know that having diverse talent, diverse thoughts, people coming from many experiences is how they just advance and get better.
Yeah, right.
And with the educational side, my career has been over 20 years teaching higher ed, and I've been on both sides with HBCUs as well as now with PWI. And that gap is just as wide, if not even wider, in the developmental and training phase or in the educational purpose. And I have some slides. Diego, can we roll? I have data. I have proof.
The receipts are here.
No, I just want to show just kind of how it puts into perspective. Can we start that slide, Diego? Thank you, honey. So when we keep going, go forth. Here we are. This is just in voice and opera, just the number of degrees that were awarded in 1 year, 656. And if we skip ahead, this is the racial demographic of the degrees that are being awarded or earned. And you can see there's a huge gap between white and black and Hispanic. So just being able to get into the training programs, get into the schools, being able to receive that development, to be ready for the houses is already starting off at a disadvantage. So on the educational side, I'm pushing that agenda.
Well, to dig in that a little deeper, how are we preparing those students today versus how we should?
I think we might need to wait on that because I have a lot that I do. How are we preparing them? We are still doing the canon of repertoire, and to me, I don't think it's properly preparing them for what is happening on the opera stages now, nor do they have the voices to be able to handle what's being written for opera stages now. So if we can't teach, we don't have most of us don't have orchestras. When I say us, I'm talking about liberal studies institutions, not conservatories, not the large institutions that have the backing or the support for full productions. But every other institution usually relegates opera to an ensemble. It's a 1-credit class. And those students who are focused on opera really don't get the opportunities to do it at the level that will really prepare them. So it's an ensemble, it's a side thing. The ones that do want to pursue it, hopefully they'll get opportunities to do full productions, but it is something that is not really supported to be able to help the students who really want to focus. If they can't get into a conservatory or something like that, they have to take what their university can provide. And a lot of times they just don't have the resources to put into full-scale productions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And just to backtrack, and we'll come back to the educational aspect of it, but to talk about the stories on the stages, how do we feel about the stories being told on our opera stages right now? And I'm curious, from your perspectives, where is American opera leadership getting it right, and where are they missing the mark?
Well, I can start that one. I get so excited about the stories that are being told right now on stages. Like when I think of Florencia and Champion and X and Intelligence and Omar and, the Dolores Huerta opera that Nick, somewhere in here, is writing, Nick Benavides. These are amazing stories that need to be told. I also like how people are taking risk with the canon. I know that New Orleans Opera last year did a production of Butterfly where she doesn't die at the end. Mm-hmm. They didn't change any music, but just, and all of the Butterfly Project things that are happening. So I'm glad that the stories are widening. What I'm really interested in seeing in the future is, and I know we'll talk about this, but so many stories that are linked to trauma, and how are we thinking about things like Afrofuturism or how people are going to be in the future, or joy, and how important that is. But I will say, I once had a conversation with Alicia Hall Moran, who's an amazing soprano and artist. She's so cool. But I asked her a question about these really sad stories, and she was just like, well, Shakespeare's sad all the time. People die all the time. It's theater, it's drama. So, we can have those stories, but I hope at some point we have a better combination and variety.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off of that, I think in terms of how we feel about the stories, the celebration of being able to tell a wider range of stories is incredible. The thing that I am often steeped in with my work is the process of doing that. And what I would love to see more of is how we're taking care of our artists who are having to tell these stories, and so many trauma-based stories, because while they are beautiful stories to share and it is so powerful to be able to share them, the cost level of sharing them is so extraordinary. From an emotional spot, from a personal, physical spot, it manifests in so many ways, and I don't think that that's a part at least in my experience so far, that companies really prioritize. It's more of then, it's on the stage, so therefore we've done our job. But the process of doing that, for X, which we just did at the Met and then we'll be doing in Seattle next month, Robert O'Hara, the director, said on the very first day to the room of everyone for the design presentation, this is going to cost us something, and it should also cost the company as well in terms of how they take care of the artists involved. And so I think that is a huge thing in terms of not only the product that we're putting on, but what is the process and how are we treating that?
And are you seeing that shift happen? Are you seeing that acknowledgement?
I would love to see more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say HGO right now, actually it opened last night, is doing a production of Madame Butterfly. And we had a cultural consultant come in. He's Dr. Kana, yeah, Dr. Kata, yeah. Hado, okay. Did I get it right? Anyway, Google me later and I will tell you. Message me later, I'll tell you. But he came in and did a presentation for the organization's Equity, Access, and Belonging Committee, talking about what he was going to do. And then when we had our first introduction to the cast and crew, he came and he talked about the history of Butterfly. And then he did another session just with the cast. And to hear from some of the artists that they've never been able to have this type of conversation in an opera house, it just made me so happy that we're doing and thinking about those things. But I agree with Mel, we want to see it happening regularly. I never want to see or hear from an artist that they feel like they're carrying the race and the history, and that they're like the Black Google, as someone said yesterday in a panel, when they are trying to tell stories and just be artists. So I hope that we can continue and improve on that.
Not just wearing, not just being a part of the story, but not having to wear it all the time. Yeah.
I want to say for the students, it was refreshing. We did get to see Omar at Chapel Hill. But many times we don't have an opportunity to take the students to see some of these things. I was able to take my students to see Fire Shut Up in My Bones at the movies. But the regional houses, the other houses that are doing these new works, we really don't have access to be able to see them. And it would be even more inspiring to be able to see some more, at least clips or some excerpts or something that's going on that could keep the students engaged and aware of the new stories that are being told. But something like that, unless someone like me enforces it or says, guys, we're going to go see this show, then my white students would not really take interest in seeing some of these new things. So that's,
Yeah, just thinking about the stories makes me think of the creation process, the creative process in general, and who's being brought in to help tell those stories. Yeah. I think about who are we hiring to direct, design, and also who are we hiring to administer the process as well. Have you all seen a shift in that? What more could be done? What are the things that you think will move that needle forward?
Yeah, so I think that we have been seeing a shift in trying to bring in new voices, people who haven't necessarily directed an opera before, coming from the worlds of film and television, which is incredibly exciting to be able to expand our minds on what a storyteller can bring to the opera process. The issue that I've been seeing pretty consistently across many companies is that the opera creation process is so specific. To give you an idea, if you aren't aware, it's maybe 30 hours to 36 hours a week, depending on an AGMA contract that you get with the principals. Usually chorus time is significantly less than that, and then you maybe get anywhere from 2 to maybe luxuriously 4 weeks to rehearse, and then you're in the theater for tech for a week maybe, and then you open and you go. And when you have a very limited orchestra time, when you have very limited notes giving time, when you're having to kind of answer to the structures that we are abiding by, it really can be a hindering process for many creators who are used to being able to have the luxury of a whole team to help service their creative process, to have the luxury of workshops and the luxury of previews even. And that's one of those things where oftentimes the number of directors who come in who are just like they might see what the schedule looks like, and they're like, oh, okay, we can do that, but then thinking that they can ask for more, and many times they do, and sometimes there's been, support in that, but the wiggle room is very little and oftentimes not even existent. And so being able to really actually support an artist in their artistic process, I think, starts actually from before you even hire someone to do that, to ask them, what is your creative process? Do you think it can fit into what we're able to support, and really being honest about that? And I don't really think that we're looking critically enough at how that process works, because I think something radical that could be a possibility too is like, what would it look like to restructure a budget so you might have a little bit more time for a new director, new design team, and especially, even like the lighting process is totally different for opera than in theater. And that's just something that like we run into consistently, that's like a big train break stop, that I feel like could be premeditated a little bit more and thought of in a little bit more expansive way.
Dr. Hicks, how does this translate into the educational landscape at UNC? I know you talked about resources, and what Mel has outlined and described is incredibly extensive, and having experienced it myself, I know it is. So what are the challenges you face in the realm of the process of creating opera within that educational lens, working with your students, and the challenge of resources as you've outlined?
On all the institutions I've taught at, budget has been number one, first of all. Where I am currently, I am going to put their business in the street, I'm sorry, but the opera budget is $2,500 for the year. Yeah. So just to put a little bit more perspective, let me hide my name tag. So, but to be able to say, okay, what can I do with this? My first institution, I had a zero budget. I was using my own money to make costumes and build sets. So, and there's not enough time to really collaborate with the other departments, but I can do that later. But being able to establish what can I do with this, and how can I give them the opportunity that I know they need, the music that I know they're gonna need to be prepared with. So making that budget stretch. We do have, opera class might meet for 3 or 4 hours a week. So in that time, we're coaching diction. I'm teaching parts. Unfortunately, I'm the stage manager. I'm staging and doing the blocking. I'm ordering the costumes. I'm doing, so 3-4 different jobs is in that one professor, and that's not uncommon. And now they're rolling these roles back to part-time positions. So you're not even getting full-time pay for full-time work, because it's just an ensemble. And so these types of things make it incredibly difficult for those who are trying to put on the productions. And then the students, the rate at which they're learning, because they're still in their beginning stages, they need more time, but it doesn't prepare them for the scenario you just described, because they have to come ready, and they're used to being spoon-fed these. And that may not be at the larger institutions, but most of the liberal studies, yes. But it doesn't increase their ability to learn on their own, to explore the work, and then how to put all those roles together, how to develop a character. When you have time to develop character. So the budget, of course, but all of those responsibilities on one faculty member, and then the amount of time that it takes to actually learn and put on a good production in one semester, those are just a few of the challenges.
I just want to say, this is making me think of the last panel that was upstairs about failing forward. And there just seems to be in all of this a fear of failure, but where failure is where we learn the lessons. So to have students try out production is where they learn to do it right. It's where they learn to do it wrong. In the theater world, previews is how you get an audience in front of you to make sure that, okay, is the joke landing here? They shouldn't be laughing at this part, that type of thing. And it always feels like the stakes are so high, and they are. Like, we want to make excellent work. We want to all keep our jobs. We want to bring art into the world. But, even in the the development of a new piece, when it's done, the first performance, if it's not successful, we don't think of it as a new work that can take shape or evolve over time. It's just like, this piece didn't work. It's out of the canon.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And then, and to take that one step further, it's then, in the creative process while you're in the room, it forces a creator to then have to make a decision and have no grace for exploration oftentimes. And then it's one very particular, very colonized version of creation, where you're forced to just be like, this is it, and this is the absolute, and without any grace for change, because then, of course, singers are used to being able to also have something solidified by the time they hit the stage, so that you're not changing things on them and their creative process. And so it's a hindrance ultimately in the way that someone is actually able to make decisions of storytelling and creative.
Well, I was just going to say, in the realm of storytelling, we talked about in our little conversation earlier about works being created under the white gaze, and how that perception of them not seeing what they thought they were going to see makes it a failure versus a success. Can y'all talk on that just a little bit? What's your experience with that? Those conversations. I'm just asking. I'm just curious.
I'll just say the opera audiences, our traditional definition of opera audiences, are what they are. So there is work, most of the work, all of the work is being created to be placed into the white gaze. But as we're all doing more work to do audience development, bringing more people into the rooms for creation who can say, oh no, y'all can't do that. You can't take this to this city and have that person say that word or have that person do that thing. They're gonna burn down the opera house, So, but to have, again, more diverse opinions in the room for the creation, to bring those different creatives in, and then also be building audiences, getting to know the community. Then we're going to talk about that white gaze, or that opera audience is going to change, and then the work will have to change with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and following up on that, like the idea of also, in a kind of a way, in failing forward in terms of failure of your audience's expectations and not being afraid to challenge that. Because if you think about, some of the works in our canon, like Carmen, for example, like when that first premiered, people were freaking out about it. And they, was like aghast at the fact that this female character was so strong on stage. And I think not necessarily being afraid to challenge people's expectations is a really good thing. Obviously, there's, the building of an audience basis that has to be considered, and cultivating a season in which people want to attend. But I think that there's something really exciting about not being afraid to subvert expectations in that way.
How has casting evolved? I see a lot more black and brown faces on the stage, which is great.
But in which productions?
That's the question. That's my question. Where are you seeing it? Where can we grow? I think one of the things that I worry about, and I think artists friends of mine worry about, is being pigeonholed in like a new canon of Porgy and Bess, pretty much. How are we combating that, or what are you all seeing in your realms?
Can I just really quickly, I want to shout out Asian Opera Alliance, because their social media account, when they tell us about ourselves every year with how many Asian American folks are part of productions, okay, how many are in Madame Butterfly, how many are not, I think that's been like very telling information. So just to like call it out and let people see this is what the numbers are, I think that's gonna I hope that is going to have a positive effect into the future. So I love that example.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that something that I personally have seen an improvement on, but can absolutely be significantly more improved upon, is, are we really only casting our black and brown artists in the black and brown stories that we're telling, or are we offering a wide range of roles that expand many stories, that expand to the canon. And a good example of this is, for example, Ryan Speedo Green is singing Charles in Fire Started My Bones this spring at the Met, and then he will do Escamillo right after that. And it's like that is an example of a way to be able to really authentically support your artists in the multitude of roles and the multitude of capabilities of character that they can possess, is to actually not only say, oh, what can we silo them into, but how can we then support them throughout the rest of the season?
Or we're not just vessels of trauma, right? Like, where's the joy? Like, where's the love? Where's the nerdiness that envelops our culture and everything like that? Yeah. Curious, Dr. Hicks, how do you deal with casting right now in UNC and kind of exploring the stories that you're mentioning?
Basically, whoever wants to take the class sends me a video, and then I figure out what opera I can do that has everybody involved. I'm not dealing with 30, 40 students. I'm talking about 10 or 12 on a regular. So again, it's an ensemble, it's a side thing, it's not something that's really pushed into the schedule, and it is a big time commitment. It's a big commitment for the students, so they're not flocking to the opera class, unfortunately. And the previous director actually just chose students that they knew could do the parts that they wanted to put on, the production they wanted to put on. So I've always been, whoever wants to sing, come on, we'll find something for you. And I'll create a production around that. So sometimes it's a scene production. Sometimes I have something in mind. I've had to do cross casting. So I've got two women playing the tenor because I had no tenors. So just working with what we have and trying to give everybody that wants one an opportunity. Yeah.
Well, this is for Dr. Hicks, but Mel and Jen, please chime in. What do you think is the disconnect that has happened between those young singers or young artists who aren't looking at opera as a vessel for their creativity? What are they saying to you? I'm curious.
They don't like opera, and they're not exposed to it. Yes, they might be music majors, but they're coming in, just all of us, we came in for different reasons. I did not go into music to do opera, and I avoided it as long as I could. So I wanted to do gospel, right? So there's not a desire to sing this kind of music. There's not enough exposure or awareness of what it even is. They don't know the languages. I'm working with some that are seniors, and they've only had one diction class. So it depends on where they are in their development and if they even have a desire to do it. And I can't require it. It's not a requirement as an ensemble for the music majors. It's just kind of there. So I just think they don't care for it, and they're not encouraged to really learn it and enjoy the craft. So.
And I think something that's really interesting is if you can't get the interest there, or even for those people who are interested, something that the connecting point then to a career in opera in many ways, especially for women, opera is kind of like a pyramid scheme to be an opera singer. Because like, think about it, you have to pay to go to school for it. Because most of the time, like what scholarships are really available, especially for the women, like how much money you have to put down for coachings and lessons and the travel to pay for an audition, and then and headshots and the workshops, and do you even then get the role? And then when you get the role, is it even minimum wage? Do you have to pay to sing it? And then at what point in time are you actually getting a return in it? And so, to me, there's like a big disconnect in and then the lack of talking about, creating a dual career system in which, you should be encouraged to expand your artistry or your skill set so you can do both things, so that you're not having to go into debt or ask someone else for money, kind of a thing. Like the system in that way is also not set up that great.
Yeah.
The musicals are packed. They run and sign up for the musical class. But sorry, go ahead.
No, I think it's a big branding issue for us, just like as an industry. Like, I think back to when I was in conservatory years ago, but there was a mindset of that if you don't sing at the Met, get out of here. I feel like that has changed a lot. And I see people really creating, or young people really creating portfolio careers where they're not singing at the Met, they're starting their own companies, they're doing work with regional companies. They're going and working with like pop artists, but singing classical music and opera. So I see that folks are learning that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You can really create the type of career you want to and bring opera into your life in the way that you want to. But for us as an industry, I really want us to work on our branding that makes people feel like it's the elitist, exclusive, expensive, and the reason people don't like it is because they haven't studied it for years or they can't afford it. And whenever I'm talking to community folks about opera and they're like, ugh, I will tell them, like, I will break down the story. Carmen is about a fine girl who gets this dude sprung on her. She tells him that she's not into something like serious, but he gets in his feelings, and she goes with another dude, and then he's like, nah, and then he kills her. Like, that's the story. It's like truly. But people think, oh, I have to come and I have to have like a master's in music and musicology to understand these stories. And I'm like, no, they are just stories.
You
That's
seen
all
Tell
it
and
is.
see
Yeah.
Beyonce and the hip opera.
Yep.
Remember that back in the day?
Well, it's interesting because to that point too, I think that opera can be a really intimidating art form to get interested in and to sit down and enjoy, because it is an art form that requires patience, which I think is one of the beautiful things about opera. And something that I usually tell new to opera audiences, or like if I'm inviting friends, I usually say, hey, like, it's okay if you fall asleep. Because there's something beautiful of being able to be still enough to enjoy whatever music is around you, and like it's the natural body's response to then like it's super relaxed. And if you doze off, I'm like, just join us when you're ready.
I don't feel so bad now. Thank you.
I don't.
But I think making that clear and kind of breaking down these walls of the elite is that it's okay, because we are living in like a 10-second TikTok attention span era where it is going to continue to be difficult to really engage in a way that isn't like in the Broadway capacity. I've seen a shift in it's so much more like a big rock concert where everything's really loud and really bright and really colorful and very in your face. And I love that we are an art form that's kind of like, no, let's enjoy the rawness of the human voice and actually communicate to audiences like, isn't this amazing that you can hear this one person over this many members of playing instruments and you're all the way in the back. Like, that's a really cool thing, I think. And so if we like kind of hopefully help engage people in that level of the artistry, I think that there's hope for it.
I agree with Jen. I think it is a branding issue because, like, do people even know that opera singers aren't mic'd? When they have their first experience in the opera house, and I think also I've heard from people that dress code is a big barrier for them. They don't feel like they can dress well enough to be in an opera house. And it's funny to me, after seeing Beyonce's Renaissance tour, I'm like, this is an opera. This is crazy, and and it feels grander than the Metropolitan Opera in itself, but there's still that barrier for some reason. So there has to be I think Jen had it, a branding element where we're not discussing opera in the way that reaches a 21st century audience. Jen, when I worked in the education department, we were in charge of not only just building new audiences, but making sure the ticket sales are good, and being in every community home, and knowing everybody in the neighborhood, and inviting everyone to everything, because if they didn't meet their ticket sales, they came to us to help them complete that. Are you still experiencing that in your work? And how are we bringing communities into the conversation of opera making and art making and those kind of things?
So I'm smiling because that's like my favorite thing to do about my job. Like, I love to go and tell people my synopsis for Carmen, or when we did the records last season, people are like, what is this opera going to be about? I'm like, it's about some seaside scammers who like kill people on boats because they want the money and they want all the stuff. But I love to just be able to go in our community in Houston, especially now, and talk to people who, one, are doing amazing things, are artists in their own right, are, medical professionals or librarians, all these people who are doing wonderful things, learn about what they're doing, and then see, hey, there might be a way for us to connect. And they gave me a comp ticket link and they regret it. But I'm like, why don't you come see a show and see what we're about? And I'm going to come and see a show for you. So, and some of it does turn into ticket sales. Some of it does turn into like even small donations, which I love. But I think, and our general director, Corey Dastor, believes this too. You're having an HGO experience, whether you come to the Wortham and you sit in our theater or you see us out in a park. So it's not necessarily about bringing people in and getting them to sell tickets. You're still a part of the company if you bring like a 3-year-old and they're playing with ribbons and learning songs. So I think just having that mindset that yes, your education and your community departments, like we are your first line in whatever community you're in, and we can help you connect with people as much as you want to, but they are having experiences with your companies, even if they never come into your theater and watch a Wagner show, and they will still know that they have interacted with your company. I think that's important.
Mel, what's an opera director's role? Someone who's a transient member of many communities, depending on what house they're in. What do you feel like your role is to the communities that reside in the opera houses that you work in?
That's such an interesting question because, to your point, it is a transient role, and oftentimes directors are freelancers, and so we're kind of just bopping around to different communities. And sometimes, gratefully, I am on the stage directing staff at the Met, so I've been getting to know more of being in New York City, but even then, that's still like on a show-by-show basis, just a couple of seasons. And so the thing that I crave more of, and especially if I am a primary director of a show and not an assistant director, is being able to be very authentically in the community, because I think that that's a big part of it too, is as a storyteller, knowing where you are telling your story in that context, I think is really significant, and being able to authentically connect with whom you are sharing your story and helping to create, and even, especially for like regional companies, a lot of times you'll have artists who are of that community. And so knowing that and trying to authentically know it is difficult because, I've never been in the city before. Like, let me try to dive in and get to know it within the 4 weeks and also create this show. But I think it is a something that isn't necessarily part of the expectation of companies for a director to really know the community, but something that I personally value, and can really create a way to actually connect and hopefully build ticket sales, build a community of hey, this is where I'm from, and this is what I'm doing, kind of a thing. And it just leads, I think, to more authentic storytelling, to be able to be involved in the community.
And how do we build audience going into the future? I think that's a big question. I feel a lot of conversations I hear in New York are the population of opera goers is aging, which I think is factual. So how do we build that new generation of opera goers in a more diversifying country? Our demographics are changing. What are approaches that you think would be beneficial overall? And this is for everybody.
Yeah, I would love to see more partnerships amongst opera houses and opera companies and universities as kind of a workshop opportunity, or maybe the students could be the outreach portion and be able to not only experience what's happening behind the stage and in the rehearsal process, but also if they're learning music from the same opera, it helps put it in context for them, and then allow them to be the advocates, allow them to go out and maybe into the schools and the communities to help bring people in. But there's definitely not enough conversation happening amongst those of us who are training the students, and then those who are running the opera companies. So I think if we built that connection stronger, those students would continue, even if they don't want to pursue opera. The students who would be involved in this would continue and become audience members. And I also am a big advocate for going into churches and doing things. We talk about going into the schools all the time, but I think churches are a good place to do some scenes, to do some outreach, to invite into the maybe a dress rehearsal or something like that, and just get the exposure even more out there so that people will even know what's happening, and know that they can afford it if there are affordable prices, and then understand the story, and then be able to come and experience it. So.
Well, that's a big part of it too, is the affordable prices element, and there's plenty of I think barrier there to who would want to go spend $300 on a new experience that they aren't really sure if they're going to enjoy or not, and so I know that different companies have things like 40 under 40, where it's $40 ticket price, and doing things like that is a really good way to help bring in people who might not want to be like risking a lot of money, to do comp tickets, to do the dress rehearsal offers of pairing with different organizations. I think is significant. But I think also just something that Jen had mentioned earlier is the marketing element of it, and like how are we reaching audiences in a way that we receive information mostly as a society now, which is via social media. Like where is the innovative marketing element of it, instead of just like billboards on the side of a wall where you're used to just putting something up and you're like, now people will come. I think getting more into the creative marketing side of things is a route towards that goal.
And even beyond music and arts outlets, I really want us to continue thinking about the partnerships in other types of organizations. We're working on building a partnership with the Boys and Girls Club in Greater Houston. They have 26 clubs, serve 50,000 young people. So, even before we're thinking about bringing them into the theater, we could be bringing our traveling show to the club, or doing, spring break camps with the students, so that they are introduced to it and also just able to interact and do the work, and not just singing, but you like to do hair and makeup and on TikTok, cool. You need to learn how to do hair and makeup for the theater. So like finding something to that connects people to the art form, because again, one of my colleagues once told me, I never thought about it, we are such a multidisciplinary art form. If there's something you want to do, it is here in opera. And I think I want more people to know that, and I want us to share that story.
And what other art forms are exciting you? What are the art forms that are like, we need to do that. We should borrow that, or, just curious.
I mean, if Beyonce is an art form, there you go. But, I've always been really attracted to theater. I worked at a Shakespearean theater for years, working with an early music ensemble. Theater just gets me excited. And even when I don't like a show, there's one show that I left during intermission. I still talk about it like 10 years later. But I like when people take a swing, even if it's a miss, with art, and they're, not always being safe. Like, to me, that is exciting, whether it's theater, dance, or anything else.
What Miles Davis say, be wrong, strong.
Yeah.
Looking to the next 10 years, what do you think are the main priorities opera leadership should be thinking about, taking on, centering their missions around?
Access. Period. Access for the students, access for the general public, knowledge, awareness, understanding, but to be able to access it would be huge. Yeah. Even in the inner cities, being able to travel to an opera house, it would be a lot as well. So yeah, let's bring it to the people. Let's do more shows outside of just the opera house. Let's take it into the farms. Do a farm opera. I don't know, but just I think it can be done. They were talking about that earlier as well. It can be done in multiple places, even if it's just small productions. Maybe there are some productions that are specifically for community engagement. But also the new works that are coming out being accessible for the younger singers, because if only the big houses can do them, they won't live these new works. So let's write for the voices that are learning, and because they're doing the operas that we from the canon. So if new works are coming out and only a very small select group of people can do them, then it limits its livability. So.
Yeah, I think a summary of our conversation that we've had today is what like I would like to see moving forward. Being able to cast across the board, to program across the board. That's not just siloing our communities into their own little corners. And also an element that I want to bring up but haven't gotten to yet is the cultivation too of artistry for not just on stage but also backstage, and the designers, the directors, our stage managers, our props artisans, like the gamut of work, to Jen's point, of the different artistry that can be present in opera is so vast that what an opera company can do is not only prioritize who is on stage, but who is a part of their company at large, and diversifying that front as well.
Before Jen responds, if you have a question, please get to the mic. We're going to start the Q&A session pretty soon. If you want to submit a question, please submit it. We'll get to you in just a second. Jen, do you have a thought?
Just really quick. It's really piggyback on both of the answers you've already gotten already, but just making sure that we're looking outward, because there's so much happening in the world today. There's so many ways that people who work within our companies are being affected by the world today. And yes, we need to be able to keep the level of excellence and preserve the canon and all these things, but we are humans in this world where so much is happening. So just to make sure that we're always looking out, and the opera incubation period is long, typically, but sometimes there needs to be more responsiveness to really be able to connect with what our community is doing. So just trying, and I don't have the answer, but it's like finding the happy median of those two things where we don't feel like we've isolated ourselves from our community. And then I think really interesting work will come out of those things that we're learning from our community.
Thank you. We're going to start our Q&A portion. I think there are people lined up at the mics. I can't see because it's lights. But let's start on my right. Who's lined up? Hello.
Hello. Hi, I'm Jasmine Barnes. I'm a composer. Forgive my voice. It's been a long weekend, Shameless plug, I am writing an opera called She Who Dared with my librettist, Deborah Mouton, and it's the first opera that has all Black women as the cast. What has been really interesting about this process is that casting has been really difficult to secure because of the good thing that there are more diverse operas happening. What I don't see, and I'm speaking on behalf of composers, are Black composers being commissioned by large organizations and companies. And I wanted to know how can we rectify that, and then also what can happen for Black artists, and I feel like they're pigeonholed into only doing Black operas, and if they're being commissioned, if composers are being commissioned by, I hope I'm making sense, if composers are being commissioned by large organizations, how can those same artists that are casted for that be utilized multiple times throughout the season? And I think it would be more cost effective, but what do you think?
Can I answer the first part of the question? Hi, Jasmine.
Hey.
So I think, and speaking as someone that's in leadership at HGO, this goes back to the fear of failure. We often think that the stakes are high and that we can't take any chances on a composer that we don't know or whatever, but our companies take chances all the time, and they put out work that's sometimes not good.
Awful.
And and that's frankly, and that's okay. I love opera, but y'all know, come on. But that's okay. So I think for us, someone said it in a panel earlier about that when we're thinking about these topics, we don't need a strategy or a plan. We just need to make different choices. So as opposed to thinking of, oh God, we can't get this inexperienced composer who's never done an opera, it's like, no, get a composer, then set them up for success if it's resources within your company to make sure that it is a success. But to be like, oh, this person, it didn't work out, we can never use them again. I'm like, but what did you as a company do then to surround that person with the resources they need? So it's like, take the risk. They're not always risk either. They're amazing, talented people. We just don't always give them the time and the opportunities that they need.
On the left.
Thank you all so much for this enlightening moment. Just gonna read what I wrote. When you all spoke about the trauma elements of opera, it really struck me, whether it be the stories or the production process. I'm really understanding how to navigate this journey with minimal preparation and doing my best to slay. I completed my undergrad at Oakwood University in Alabama, an HBCU. And the opera budget, I could really relate. I knew it was low. My teacher, she was doing it all. And I knew she, with the minimal tools, still found a way to inspire me to be like, oh, okay, you can cook in this kitchen. And so now, as a graduate student at Manhattan School of Music, I'm asking myself, it's not a matter of if you can't take the heat, get out the kitchen. It's more so not feeling seen really as a Black woman and feeling like, since the tools that are needed to, intentionally be catered to humans that look like me, but I just wonder what personal tools have you guys found useful that help you maintain your sanity in these spaces where you are the minority, especially when you're trying to be excellent. You're the only Black person in the room, in the production, and you're, some people just don't understand, like, your family is not a musical family, so you're like, I'm doing this thing, it's really hard. Hey, y'all, and they're like, girl, what are you talking about? But I forgot to say my name. I'm Samara Bowden. I appreciate y'all's response.
Okay. I wrote a lecture called From the Black Church to the Opera Stage. And in it, I talk about how I struggle with my own identity, my spirituality, my faith, to acclimate to becoming an opera singer. And I really had to come back to myself, what I believed, who I was, and just be me. And if those opportunities didn't come for me, they weren't for me. And to have my village that I can lean on, because my family was supportive, but even if they weren't, I had good friends in the field that, we could chat about it and support each other. But find that support system, find that network of people that are going to encourage you. Remind yourself why you're doing it in the first place. If you love it, you stay loving it, stay focused on the why you love it, because it can easily be stripped from you. And do it for you. You're trying to strive and achieve a certain level, but even if you get there, if you've lost so much of yourself, then what was it all for? So be true to why you're doing it, who you are, and what you want to bring to the table.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm just like, yes, you're why. It's so important. Yeah. Hi, and also something that I always encourage artists in the room to do, especially when it comes to telling stories that are more trauma-based, is to figure out what sort of anchors and tools you can use for yourself to center yourself back in you and your why. Yeah. As an intimacy director, I often will employ a de-rolling practice where, depending on if you are engaging in a particular scene with your fellow artists and you're needing to just tap in, it's literal tap in and out, and all you have to do is just have a moment of eye contact, a breath or two together, and a literal high five or fist or something to just kind of click in and out of a role. And I usually encourage that per every rehearsal if there's a particular scene or if it's just a particularly heavy week. I'll often try to do that within like the context of a big group. We did that a lot with Malcolm X. And knowing if you are a meditator, if you pray, if you exercise, like different things to center you and your body, since your body is your instrument, it is sacred, and taking care of that first and foremost should be your priority.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, hola. My name is Carlos. I'm a fundraiser for Chicago Shakespeare Theater. I want to do two things. One, because Jasmine was in front of me, so Jasmine reminded me that she is a collective. She's a part of a collective of Black composers called the Blacknificent Seven. One of them is Damien Jeter, who's writing 2 operas, who will be premiering soon. Virginia Opera doing Loving Me Virginia, and I believe Des Moines Opera doing American Apollo. So there's Black composers still composing music, and it's happening now. So look them up. The question I have, as someone who worked at an opera company and as a fundraiser, I'm thinking, what are your opinions, perspective, and thoughts of how the fundraising field or the fundraisers in your team or in companies can not only be a part of this, but be really complicit in helping move diversity and having Black and brown folks on stage, or even in the administration, or what can fundraising do to really help this mission out?
I'll talk about that a little bit. I think, again, if you're not out in the community and you're not meeting people and you're not seeing the wealth of their experience and sometimes the wealth of their pockets, you are not going to be thinking about how some of the new people that you're bringing in can support your company. You know, I always give the example, when I was in the DMV, I went to Alfred Street Baptist Church, which gave like $1 million to the African American Museum when it was built. And that didn't come from one person. That came from people coming together, giving $5 here, $1,000 there, but they came together because it was something important to them. So we tend to, in classical music, I'll say as a whole, we're going out to the same donors. We know the people who are safe. But there is so much potential when you connect with a different community. They will support you in their time, their talents. They'll bring people to the opera to buy tickets. They'll do all these things. So just as, you know, especially working in education and community, or having your board say this to fundraisers, or your executive leadership, that there's so much potential in our cities and our communities, and we just have to make sure that we are always trying to bring people in under the fold, so that hopefully someday it will become that type of support that we need, and we should never forget that.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for any additional questions from the Q&A. Apologies there. But I do want to ask my panel one more question. Where do we go from here? Where's the hope in it all? What are the next steps?
I'll start. And inspired by Dr. Lori, we need to collectively know our why.
Yeah.
And remember our why, and individualistically and collectively. And to me, my why is I think opera is an art form which communicates like no other. The expression of the raw human voice, the collaboration between so many different artists, and telling stories that are exciting, they're juicy, they're sexy, they're tragic, they're the human experience elevated. It's worth figuring out how we move into the future in a more equitable way.
I'll say, well, first I want to say, because I messed up this gentleman's name, Dr. Kunio Hara, who is the Associate Professor of Music History at the University of South Carolina, who's done a lot of research around Madame Butterfly, and he's amazing. So I wanted to make sure I said that. But just where do we go from here? I think it's continuing to do what has started happening since 2020 and not backing up on it, that we said we wanted to bring the entire community into what we do. We can't stop, and sometimes it's not going to be successful, and that's okay, and we can learn a lesson from that. But the important thing is that we keep advancing, just like we had to advance through school. You didn't quit just because the Countess's aria wasn't good for your voice. You found another aria, and that's really what we have to do throughout our company.
I think for the educational process, I think it behoove us to really have a reality check as to what we can afford to do and what our students can handle on the undergraduate level. Now, when you get into master's and doctorate, it's a different story, but the conservatories and the larger institutions can provide those wonderful experiences, but the majority of the smaller ones cannot. So if maybe there was some collective, maybe some schools could get together to provide those experiences and pull together the funds and the resources, so as well as more community opera experiences. So just more opportunities, but more realistic opportunities for the students to be able to learn and grow and do what they can to be prepared for the next level. So,
Well, knowing that you three are in the trenches and in the field, I feel hopeful in all of that anyway. So I'd like to thank our wonderful panelists.
thank you.
Thank you
Thank you.